So it's Thursday the 9th of January, it's day 4 of the Jewel of Arabia expedition, and we've just woken up at to a temperature of 3.4 degrees, which is the coldest morning that we've had so far. And it wasn't only cold, all of the sleeping bags were covered in a very, very heavy dew, which I'm told by our friends at the Royal Geographical Society gives the equivalent of 1 millimetre of rainfall every day to this desert which borders the Indian Ocean, which explains why it has much more biodiversity than one would expect of a normal desert. So yesterday was super busy. We visited the fort at Bani Buwali where Bertram Thomas arrived in 1927. We were greeted and treated very warmly by the Wali, who overlooks that particular district of Oman. From there we drove to the Outward Bound Centre, Desert Training Centre, to meet a group of fantastic young people who were at the end of a 3 or 4 day course with Outward Bound Oman, and we saw a fantastic 4-wheel drive off-road wheelchair designed by the team at Equal Adventure in Scotland in action in the desert. A beautiful piece of equipment which enables young people with disability to benefit from Outward Bound courses. And then we had a long drive back to Bidia, which is this sort of gateway to the northern end of the Sharqiya Sands, and then a 40-kilometre drive in south along a long valley to what is, I think, the most exclusive of all the desert camps for tourists and visitors, and it's called a 1,000-night camp. And 1,000-night camp is managed and owned by a fantastic Omani lady who's a friend of mine called Wisal Al-Harthi. And Wisal is just an amazing lady, and she runs this really remote camp in the middle of the desert. And you'll hear me having a conversation with Wisal. I managed to catch up with her a little bit earlier. It might sound a little bit different to this one simply because we struggled to find somewhere quiet to speak because the camp was absolutely full to brim with tourists, because it's the winter in Oman and it's the tourist season. So we'll hear from Wisal a little bit later, but today is the first day crossing the Sharqiya Sands. We've probably got 4 or 5 days heading south-southeast, and if we head south-southeast, travelling every day, we will eventually reach the shore of the Indian Ocean. So we are walking through a sand sea, and I'm very lucky to be walking behind a group of amazing students from the British School Muscat, and with them 2 really inspiring geography teachers, Tamsin Murchie and Dan Baldwin, who do a great job of really enthusing young people about the importance of geography at the British School. So we spent last night around the fire answering lots of questions about sustainability and biodiversity with these really talented young people who are great ambassadors for their school. But walking beside me now as we walk to our camels, the camels are waiting at the top of the valley just ahead of us, is a fantastic guy who I'm very lucky to call a friend, and Jonathan Turner we're walking through a sea of sand, but Jonathan spends most of his life under the sea here in Oman and has done for many, many years, and has some amazing stories. There's some vehicles just going past, as you can hear in the background there. You have to drive quite fast in the sand, otherwise you sink and get stuck, so the vehicles tend to be quite noisy when they go past. But Jonathan, if you could just tell us how long have you been in Oman? How did you come to be here, and what do you do?
Well, I've lived here since the year 2000. I've been here 25 years, coming into 25 years now. I was originally working in the UAE and used to do periodic works on the coast of Oman, and decided I preferred to live here than there, and established a company here in 2000. So we've been here a long time.
But obviously a Scottish accent. So you weren't born in UAE. What brought you out to UAE from Scotland, and what were you doing in Scotland before you came here?
Well, actually, I used to be involved with fish farming and smoked salmon for production, but I'm also a commercial diver. So I worked originally started working as a diver in Singapore, and came to the UAE first, actually. And from the UAE, we used to come down to Oman all the time doing works at BAM and further south on the island of Mazira, which is where I met my business partner, Sultan Mohammed Al-Hamidi, and we set up the company that we've got here just now.
Fantastic. And Jonathan, you spend your life underwater putting pipelines and cables and building sea defences and all sorts of things. I mean, you must have seen some amazing things under the sea. I mean, most of us who are sort of weekend snorkelers or whatever, we see the odd fish, but and turtle, because the sea around Oman is pretty abundant with life. But what are some of the more interesting things that you've seen? If I were to ask you the top 3 things that you've seen under the sea when you've been around in the last 20 odd years, what would you say they were?
I think one of the most amazing things, occasionally you get jellyfish blooms and I think I'm certain it is not in any way relating to damage to the environment, but I think it's a natural phenomena. And about every 4 or 5 years you get millions and millions of jellyfish. And of course we're involved with the power stations where the water gets taken in to cool them. They all block up all the entrance to the pipelines. And diving in jellyfish where all you can see is jellyfish is a very strange experience. I think at one point we took 12 lorry loads of jellyfish out of one of the screens.
Goodness.
But other things we've seen since we've been here are, of course, whales are always a spectacle when you see them. And I think my favourite photograph I've got of them is a whale shark, which you occasionally come across just by chance, usually on our work sites.
Incredible. And I recall you once telling me about hammerhead sharks. Were they quite common, and where did you see those?
Well, they were actually in the Muscat Dam, probably in the entrance to the Straits of Hormuz, so off the Oman coast. But it was actually near the border between the UAE and Oman, and we were diving in deeper water then, and actually that area is famous for the breeding of sharks, including hammerheads. Sadly, there are a lot less now than there used to be, but that was more than 20 years ago, and there were many of them, as I saw in the water.
Yeah, well, it's the same where I live in northeast Scotland. You know, the sea is not what it was, and human activity sort of taking its toll on the environment a little bit. But what about human history? Because Oman has an incredible culture, not just natural heritage, but also in terms of cultural heritage. And what kind of human historical things have you seen under the sea that are quite surprising?
Well, I mean, we have found in the past anchors, the stone anchors, it's difficult to date them because they were being used, of course, for thousands of years, but they were also used over 100 years ago, or 100 years or so ago. They were also common. I think our best find was in Muscat, in the Bay of Muscat, which of course is a very historic bay, and we found. Initially the divers came up and reported the seabed was covered in amber, so we were of course very excited. Turned out it wasn't amber, it turned out it was frankincense of a very high quality that was still in the amphoras that it had obviously been transported in. So we excavated that area and came across also some cannons which are now in the museum. So we recovered the cannons and gave them to an expert in Oman who basically restored them and put them on their carriages and gave them to the museums, I think in Hazm and also in Muscat.
And did the expert, was he able to tell you what the origin and the age of the cannons might have been?
He was amazing, actually. The guy, the easy one, he said that one of them was very large one. It was very corroded because the seawater obviously eats the metal. The military one, he said, well, that's very easy. It's a military one, so it's Portuguese, and it's from, I can't remember the exact date, but he could identify it immediately. But the most amazing thing was that we got two other matching ones, and they were identical. They were slightly smaller, actually. And he looked at them, and his name was Chris Rhodes, sorry, I should say that. He looked at them, and he basically said, oh, very difficult for me to date these because they are not military, so they don't have any sort of special marking on them. But I'll date them between, they're probably between 1840 and 1845, which for me, of course, was a pretty accurate dating in the first place.
Yes.
And it was simply, he could tell from the shape of the cannon and the type of moulding exactly where they'd come from. They'd actually come from Scandinavia and obviously been bought by privateers or private ships and somehow managed to end up in the water in Muscat.
Oh, incredible. Incredible. So we're just continuing to plod along here. There's some lovely group of gaff trees, which is one of the few species of trees that can survive the desert here in Oman. But all of them are like lollipops because nothing hangs below the height that a camel can reach. So the camel's upstretched neck is the kind of lower level of the trees that we're looking at, but they're beautiful trees. But Jonathan, we're heading southeast, and we're heading down the coast like Bertram Thomas did in 1927, and we're heading for an island called Masira Island. And I know your company is called Masira International, and named after the island. This island is full of stories, and the area that we're travelling through is full of legends and amazing stories. And I know you're a great, you take a great interest in history and stories and legends. So, could you just tell us one or two short stories that you think people might find of interest?
Well, Masira Island we've been involved with Masira Island because originally we had my business partner is from Masira Island actually, and he is retired now, but and I visited many times, and we've also camped there, and so when we're there we take the opportunity to ask everybody about stories that have happened on Masira Island, and Masira Island is surprisingly, for such a remote location. There are two towns on it, but the people who live there are surprisingly good at speaking English, which always surprised me when we go there, obviously, because there's been an RAF base in Masira Island from the 1920s. There's actually been a base on Masira Island. So the people who lived there used to record the stories as well. And there's actually, I think, a book about it that's somewhere as well. The best story I think about Masira Island is about there was a shipwreck, and I think the shipwreck was actually on the Kuria Muria Islands, which are now called the Halaniat Islands, near Salalah. And the crew it was reported that the crew escaped the shipwreck on their launches and sailed north and eventually came to Masira Island. When they came ashore, they got into an altercation with the local people. It was said they got into an altercation, resulting in a small battle or a fight, in which they were all actually overcome and killed by the people of Masira. Except there was one young ship's boy who remained with them, and the locals took pity on him because he was so young, and he then lived with them on the island. And many years later, a sailing ship passed Masira Island, and of course this boy was there, and someone questioned where he'd come from, and the story came out. And I think this was, nobody really believed the story, but they then followed it up and found out it is in fact a true story, and it's actually now quite well documented. And there's a memorial in the north of the island. I think it's near Hilf, the town of Hilf, which is quite nice. And the other thing is the south of Masira Island is, by superstition, of all the locals, they didn't used to go to the south of the island, or not many people used to go down there, and it was because they felt it was occupied by jinns, which are of course genies or spirit people. It's a myth, of course, but at the south of the island in Masira, the locals used to tend to avoid that area. And it's recorded that when somebody drove down there from the RAF, and he said in the distance he saw two figures walking, very tall figures, one in dark clothes and one in light clothes. And as he got closer and closer, he thought he was driving towards them. They suddenly disappeared. So he got out the car and looked around the place, and there was nowhere for them to hide, and they just completely disappeared altogether. So when he went back to the camp, he asked one of the locals and said, "What is this?" And he said, "Oh, where was it?" And he explained where he was in the south of the island. And they said, "Oh, that's the jinns. That'll be jinns there." And this story has been apparently repeated several times, which is it makes it quite. If you go to Masira Island, it does feel a special place, and you feel you can understand why people come up with these myths.
Yeah. It's amazing how this respect for the spirits still prevails in Oman. We've taken groups out into the desert of people working in front of, computers in banks here, and but still, when we say we're going to a particular wadi area, they're very, the spirits are evil. We're not really comfortable going there. So it's still very much embedded in the culture. So that, Jonathan, that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. So from amazing sort of cultural stories and from life under the sea, I think what we need to do to end this podcast is just now go and listen to Wisal Al-Harthi telling us about the challenges of running the most remote tourist camp deep in the desert of Oman. So if you hear a bit of background noise, it's because I am now sitting in what I think is the best desert camp in all of Oman. And it's a place that's really special to me because I've been coming here for 20 years, I think. And sitting with me is an extraordinary lady who oversees this camp and runs this camp. And it's, I think, probably the most remote camp in the Sharqiya Sands, the big sand sea about 2 hours south of Muscat. So I'm sitting here with a fantastic lady called Wisal Al-Harthi. And Wisal, I've just arrived in the dark after a really bouncy ride through the desert. And lovely to see as the sun was setting, the twinkling lights of the camp ahead of us. And then I knew we weren't lost and we were going to make it. But to someone who's listening to this podcast who can't see, so they're listening but they can't see, could you describe 1000 Night Camp, which is where we are, to someone who cannot see it?
Good evening, Mark. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity and tell the story of the 1000 Nights. To describe the 1000 Nights, I would say it's a camp like an oasis in the depth of the Sharqiya desert and surrounded by the golden dunes and the ghaf tree and
I remember it's these gaff trees and the gaff trees, for people who are listening, gaff trees is a species of tree it's one of the only two species, I believe, that survive in the sands, the other being the acacia tree, which we associate with Kenya and Africa. But the gaff is a really special tree for medicines and for birds and plants. And Wisal runs the camp now, but how I got to know Wisal was because her father was a great friend of mine, and we planned many adventures together. And it was your father that really had the vision, wasn't it, to set up this camp many years ago. So, it's as you described it. He chose this place because for mile after mile there are no trees, and then you come into this valley and there are maybe 40-50 quite big trees, and clearly the water table's fairly close to the surface, so the trees survive. And that's where your father obviously had the idea of setting up a camp. But Wisal, what was your father's vision? You know, what did he want to create, and tell us a little bit about the history. When did he start the camp? Because if my memory serves me right, he started working with tourists before he had a campsite, didn't he? So just tell us how it all grew and evolved.
Definitely. Before, just to describe the Thousand Night and my father visionary of setting a camp here, I would like, if you allow me, I would like to go and describe who was Abdullah Al-Harthi.
Please.
And I'm sure you know him as a nomader and a traveler who liked to explore the desert. And since we were young and kids, we used to do overlanding through Oman and through the desert. And this place was one of the locations that we used to come. I remember that when I was, I think, 9 or 10 years. So that was a very special kind of experience for us, sleeping under the stars and, seeing all the nature and the creature of the desert. So day by day, I think he wanted to create this sanctuary as a place where visitors from all over the world would like to come and experience it.
And when was that? When did he first? Because I know he used to. I think if my memory is correct, he used to take people out in vehicles, small groups in vehicles, and had a few great adventures. If I remember some of the stories that he told me. So when did he start the tented camp?
So that came into stages. So I think the first stage was, let's say, in late of 2003, when we had the first 4 camps. Sorry, the
tents or
the tents, and it started to become a hit. At that time, I think no camps were around in the area, and there was a kind of a demand, as Oman known for its nature and the desert beauty. So from 2003, he was running this. He was running the Thousand Night till 2012. After his sudden pass away, and then I saw myself, with this heritage, let's say, and challenge.
Yeah.
I remember I was in my last year in the university, so it was quite challenge. And there was a few that gave me the drive to run the place, to be honest. Because I heard someone saying, oh, the legacy of Thousand Night is gone. And till today, whenever I feel a bit tired or frustrated, let's say, I just keep that word and I can feel his soul presence in this place.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, beautiful. And so this was the first camp in the area here, and your father was a real visionary, I felt, and was the first to make the move to set up a permanent tented camp, and probably started with 4 tents. And here we are in 2025. How many tents have you got now?
So at the moment we are running with 72 tents with different categories to deliver the needs of our guests and visitors whom come from all over the world with the highest expectation and standard.
Just to help people imagine, it's about 40 kilometres from where the blacktop stops, 35, 40 kilometres of driving across the sand to get here. So it's quite a drive, but it's certainly worthwhile when you get here. And when I talk about tents, for people who are listening, what size are your tents? Most people think it may be 2 people to sleep in a tiny tent, but what
so the standard size in our tent is start from 5 by 5 meter, which is equivalent to 25 square meter, beside the other facility that associate with a standard hotel room, I would say. Then we go up with the deluxe tent, and then we have private pool tent that we have created, and we launched 4 years ago, just before COVID. And then we have the suite, the sand suite, which was as well created when my father was with us.
Yeah.
So 40 kilometer, I know it sounds a big distance, but we try to overcome the distance, and we would like to create that feel of remoteness and the thousand night when it comes to it.
Yeah.
As well, we try as much as possible. We try to use the authentic wool. I think you saw that.
Yes.
And it's one of our challenge to get the quantity that we are looking to get it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they try to mix up the wool with some other fabrics to minimize the cost.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sustain in the climate what we have here in Wahiba Sand.
Yeah, well, on that note, Wisal, I mean, it's now January, and obviously we're in the depths of winter, which is the best month to travel. But still, in the middle of the day, it can be a bit warm for people who aren't used to the heat. But in the heat of summer, what temperatures will it reach here in July, August?
It would reach easily 52 Celsius.
52 Celsius,
Yes.
wow. And the strong UV is really going to frazzle any fabric, isn't it, in that?
Exactly, along with the heat winds that come from the east part.
Yeah.
And the climate is quite a challenge for us.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just the climate, is it? I mean, it's good to talk about the challenges, because here you are running what I think is Oman's most successful desert camp, and you know, you've proved anyone who felt that you couldn't achieve what your father achieved, you proved them totally wrong, because what I love about this place and what you do, Wisal, is that you never stand still, and those hot summer months are often used to develop and to refine something even better for the next season. But, you know, we are 40 kilometres away from the nearest tarmac road. And that, as you say, it gives a remoteness and a unique experience. But it also must present challenges for you to run the camp, you know, as a tourism centre. You know, what are the challenges, what are the main challenges that you find in being so remote? Because if you were a camp 2 kilometres from that road, life would be much easier, wouldn't it?
Well, running the 1,000 Nights camp, it's come with its own share of challenge. So the first thing I'm sure I would highlight is the distance from the nearest city. And that required a proper planning for the logistic and the transportation to receive all the provisions, the water, and the transportation of the staff in between. So this is, I would say, one of the highest challenges that we're facing. Beside that, the infrastructure. So we don't have the infrastructure what's in a city. We have to create our own energy, and then the waste management as well, it's considered to be a challenge for us. As well, the water supply, electricity supply, connectivity when it's come to telecommunication.
Yeah, well, those are all big challenges that you seem to take very well in your stride. But so your provisions you get from the local community or Muscat?
So we have a certain provision, we get it locally from the neighbors, I would say, which come under, let's say, the meat supplies. Not all of them, but a quite good chunk, because that depends also on the availability of the resources as well. Some supply we get it from Muscat as well. Some supplies we get it from the local market, whom we have a partnership, let's say, when it's come to delivering all of these provisions.
Good for you. And energy, you have a generator and you use a bit of solar as well, I suspect?
Yes, so at the moment we're using generators, but our water system, we are using solar system to heat up the water. On the next few years, we are planning to enhance the use of the solar energy and to have a more sustainable resources.
Yeah, brilliant. And water, does that come from a well under the sand, or do you bring it in, or is it a combination of the two?
Water, there is a well next to the camp, but we don't want to overuse and drain this well because it's also feed a lot of what you call a lot of nature, and as well the ghaf tree. So a big chunk of the water, especially when it's come to the cooking and when it's come to the use and that goes into the manufacturing of the food, we get the fresh water from the town itself.
You know, for someone who would have sit and listen to this, wouldn't really understand the sort of daily routine of a camp like this. You've got 40 plus tents. You've got how many people here tonight? 160, did you say? Or?
Today we're having 160.
160 people, so you're pretty full, which is, you know, expected and good news in the winter season, because during COVID, I'm sure tourism dwindled to nothing. But just tell me, a 24-hour cycle at 1,000 Night Camp, what happens? I mean, at midnight everyone's asleep, I presume.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. So talk me through a typical day.
So in a typical day, when it's come to the visitor or our guest perspective, first thing you'll see a lot of our guests, they will climb up the dune and will try to catch up the sunrise. I think this is a must here in Sharqiya Sands. And then they would go for a breakfast in our restaurant, Arabian Night restaurant. Then a lot of guests will decide whether they go on some excursions that is provided by our local community, Jabir and his friend and family, let's say. And so we have different sort of activities and excursion that we have created together to give the best experience when it's come to authenticity and standards, when it's come to safety as well. Yeah. So we have like a dune bashing or Bedouin trekking. So what they would do, they will have a walk through the desert and learn about the ecosystem and the water supplies, how it's come, how the life survive in the desert. A lot of people say, oh, it's desert, there is nothing to see or nothing to notice, just a dune, some trees, and that's it. But once you really immerse yourself in the desert itself, you will find it's a very full environment of learning and thoughts as well. Yeah, it's a whole sensory experience, isn't it? And do most people stay for one night or more? What percentage you stay for one night? I would say 70% would stay for one night, and in the last 2 years we see some increased demand for 2 nights, and we have also the guest and visitor who come and stay for 1 week. Wow. Or 10 days just to shut down, from the outside world.
Yeah, fantastic.
And chill and relax in the desert.
And the nature of the tourists, Wisal, is that? Is there a particular part of the world where most of them come from? Would you say, rather than other countries, and have you seen a change over time at all, where more people coming from a particular area than others?
Well, I would say in the cooler months, especially when it's come to November, January, February, and March, we have a lot of guests from Europe, and as well we have the local guests who are coming from Muscat and Sohar and nearby area, especially in the national holidays and the weekends. So we have a mixture kind of demography of the
Yeah.
guest.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know you've had some pretty distinguished people staying here. The King of Spain, I think I seem to remember once, was here. I remember seeing a helicopter passing over the desert, and I was told he was heading this way. But so I know, having stood here before and spoken to people queuing up for their breakfast, you know, and their night in the desert is the highlight of their sort of 5 or 6 day visit to Oman. You know, beautiful hotels in Muscat and diving and turtles and mountains, but that night in the desert under the stars is quite memorable. But you know, you've been a huge success, Wisal, but I know from, you know, living here 20 something years that other people have tried to copy what you've done, and I know examples of people who've tried to set up tourist camps, but the local communities have been quite against that, because sometimes if it's not controlled, tourism can scare the local animals and the camels and things like that, and the noise of the cars frightens them. And you know, how would you say, why have you been so successful when other camps have struggled? You clearly thrive and you succeed, and so what would you put that down to?
Well, from the beginning, and how my father set the dynamic of this camp, and I hope as much as possible I'm doing that, and I keep doing that. From the beginning, we have involved the local community in the planning and the operation of the camp by ensuring their values and their tradition are honored within our operation as well. So we said it's a success that lies between a mutual respect and collaboration, and growth as well. So they see if the camp there is a growth in the camp, there is a growth as well in their welfare and in their community as well. Beside that, we have to respect the culture. I always say we have to respect the culture, to represent the culture of the Bedouin. And I'm sure you have gone and you met a lot of people when it's come to that term. So this is one part as well, sustainability practice. On a period we try to do some desert cleaning with the locals as well. And beside that, we don't overuse the water. We hire people from them, you know, people from our local community to deliver the water. So they understood how we run the 1,000 Nights camp, and this is something that my father said from the beginning. And I did not want to change that. You know, things are getting bigger, but there are some fundamentals that I really believe in it when it's come in terms of operating this the 1,000 Night camp.
Yeah, brilliant. Good for you. Well, that respect and recognition is why you've been so successful. And I know Jabber here. He's. I'm sure he does many things, but I know he's often out there with his camels, with camels with groups. And I've seen, I think, local musicians you employ, people who play the oud, and dancers I've seen here, and the storytellers. It's you know, you create opportunities for so many people across society here, which I'm sure people respect hugely.
Yes, I always say 1,000 Night camp, even like with our staff and team member, I always say 1,000 Night camp, it's not a bed and breakfast hotel. It's a place where we share the experience. So I think today you'll see a lot of things going around. We have Rashid, who's roasting the Bedouin coffee, and he will do the traditional bread. So this is one of the things that we do it on a daily basis, how the Bedouin used to cook the bread in the ash itself. And then we have the musician as well. So it's all an experience that we want to share when it comes to the Omani hospitality in general. It's something we want to share it with the people from all over the world.
Yeah, well, you do that, and you do that very, very well. And last question, I promise you, because I know you've got a super busy night tonight, and you need to get out there. But just going back to those people that come from around the world, and I know Germany is an important market for tourism in Oman, UK very important, Italy, Spain. I mean, people come from everywhere, really, don't they? Increasingly, but obviously travel is changing, isn't it? And tourism is changing, and people still travel, but you start to see the term responsible travel starting to appear much more, and sustainable travel, and people are a bit more picky about where they go, and their expectations in terms of what is the place that I'm staying doing to be environmentally good and sustainable. So tell me, I mean, you live in one of the most hostile environments on the planet. We're not far from the biggest sand desert on Earth, the Empty Quarter, which is a couple of hundred kilometres across the gravel plains. What do you do at the camp, Wisal, that, to play to that responsible, eco-friendly, sustainable direction that tourism is developing?
I think sustainability is the heart of the Thousand Nights camp. As much as possible, we aim to minimize our footprint in this location. Beside that, if you notice the infrastructure of the camp, it's all made from the natural and the material that come within the desert, whether we are using the shade of the tents or the wood type that we are trying to do a replica of it, so we get it from Africa, the acacia wood. And as well, the tent, if you notice, it's not built as a complex, it's scattered around the camp itself, so that gives a kind of freedom and movement, let's say, for the sand movement as well. If I showed you a photo 15 years ago and photo now, you will see we have much more tree, and beside that, the desert valley did not get changed, so we are in the same landscape, and I hope our team and myself doing our best to minimize that. Along with that, we're trying, as I told you initially, we're trying to enhance our solar system and to enhance the use of the solar itself. Hopefully in the next 2 years we have a plan when it's come to that. As well, reducing our water intake. At the end of the day, it's a desert. So never take something, and this is something that my father told me, never take something for granted. So this is one area as well where we are focusing to preserve the water. And we are trying to work with the local community when it comes to the desert cleaning, and periodically, so every month we are doing some campaign. Our staff will participate, and as well the local will participate in that. So that's it.
Yeah, I know, raising a bit of environmental awareness, it never hurts, does it? And no, fantastic. Wisal, thanks so much. I mean, you've got a super busy camp out there.
I would like to thank you, first of all, again, for this opportunity. And I hope the camp will give the experience and the expectation that our guests are looking for. I always say it's not about the place, it's about the experience and memory you remember in that place or wherever you are with your beloved ones, friends or family. So that's it.
Yeah, no, I've never met anyone who's left this camp without having had the most incredible time. And yeah, fantastic. Well, I hope people who are listening, eventually travel to Oman. And if you do, you have to come to a Thousand Night Camp, because it is the ultimate desert experience. Not a noisy place. It's a very relaxing place. There's no quad bikes going up and down the sand dunes. It's a real place that's close to nature and at one with its local community and its local people. So, Wisal, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mark.